The United Kingdom is likely to miss the Paris climate target by wide margin, analysis shows. I'm going to read into this exclusive from The Guardian, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an exclusive from The Guardian with the headline that the UK is likely to miss the Paris climate targets by a wide margin, analysis shows. The exclusive reveals that under current policies, Britain could fall short of internationally agreed goals of 68% cut emissions by 2030. I mean, are we surprised again by this story, guys? To say that they're likely to miss it, yes, we predicted that. The UK was likely to miss its targets, but to miss it by such a wide margin just goes to show just how little care that not just this Prime Minister but previous Conservative Prime Ministers care about making a difference to our climate whatsoever. I do question whether or not Labour are going to have the same ambitions. Yes, they do have a Green Prosperity Plan, but they have watered it down quite a bit. And they're using what they claim is a reasonable excuse because they don't know what the numbers are going to be like. We don't know what the economy is going to exactly be come the general election and what we're going to be like after it. So I think those caveats are important to take into consideration there. And I just think this is frustrating. I know, obviously, on this channel, really, I don't cover too much on. I used to cover quite a lot on climate, but not many people find it interesting. But I think this is important to highlight just how, amongst many things that the British government have been failing to do, not meeting climate targets is another one to add to this Conservative government, as they have been in power for the last 13 years, and I think that's important to distinct. So the UK government is likely to miss its target under the Climate Paris Agreement by a wide margin, analysis showed, dealing a devastating blow to Britain's standing on the international stage. Consistently, our international stage has consistently been damaged by the Conservatives over the last 13 years. Especially the last couple of years in particular have been really, really harmed. Under current policies, the UK greenhouse gas emissions are likely to be 59% lower in 2030 than they were in 1990. But the countries internationally agreed that the target is for a 68% reduction by the end of this decade. The gap is likely to leave Britain in breach of these commitments. The 2030 emission goals was agreed at COP26, the UN's climate summit hosted by the UK in Glasgow in 2021. It has been reaffirmed at COP28 taking place in Dubai this week. Failure to meet the UK's commitments would hinder international efforts to limit global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels. The estimate comes from analysis of publicly available and government data carried out by Friends of the Earth. It found that the current policies would achieve only just half the emissions needed to cut by 2030. The gap has grown significantly under Rishi Sunak's leadership, Friends of the Earth has found. The conclusions echo the concerns of the Climate Change Committee, the CCC, which found in September that U-turns made by the British Prime Minister on important aspects of net zero policy, including delaying the phase-out of the diesel and electric cars of oil boilers and the scrapping of some proposed measures on home insulation, will make it more difficult for the UK to meet its climate targets. Danny Gross, a campaigner at Friends of the Earth, said, despite the Prime Minister's repeated assurances, the UK's 2030 climate commitment is seriously off track, and that the gap has grown significantly under Rishi Sunak's leadership. The fact remains that you can't provide new fossil fuel projects, max out North Sea oil and gas, and roll back vital green policies while staying committed to our climate targets. It's one road or the other. The UK has two sets of climate goals. The statutory carbon budget sets out for more than a decade in advance by the CCC, with the current budget running to 2037, and the UK's target under the Paris Agreement, known as the Naturally Determined Contributions, the NDCs, which is pegged to emission cuts by 2030. Pledges on emission cuts under the Paris Pact are not legally binding. The treaty itself is, but the pledges come in as non-binary annexed. However, to receive on them, it would be regarded as a significant concern. Strengthening the UK's NDCs was a crucial plank of the COP26 conference, announced with fanfare by Boris Johnson. The former Prime Minister, who had attended the COP28, were it not for his appearance at the COVID inquiry. Is known to have deep connections about Sunak's handling of the climate action. A senior ally of Johnson has said making progress on this is hugely important agenda is all about consistency. It is critical importance that the UK remains a world leader in this effort. They're not a world leader. Stop calling yourself world leader in efforts. And we're not a world leader in blimmin' anything right now. Sunak has said repeatedly at COP28 the UK was leading the world on cutting emissions. Shut up. It's just not. But those claims are based on redundancies made decades ago when Britain shifted from coal to gas in the 1990s and 2000s. The rate of emissions decline has slowed, and factors such as increasing population of SUVs, failure to insulate homes, and slow deployment of wind farms and solar powers in England have hampered further cuts. When countries make changes to policies they could have had an impact at their commitments, they're expected to update their NDCs, logged with the UN. For developed countries, these updates are expected to be strengthening a progress agreed in Glasgow known as the ratchet under the Paris Agreement, unless they are stricken by a natural or economic disaster. Representatives of developed and developed countries at COP28 said if a large economy such as the UK were to devaluate from its NDCs without strong reason, it would be regarded as a serious breach of its pledges. Gross said there is still time for Sunak to change his policies. He's not going to, guys. With just 7 years to meet the pledge, there is still no credibility climate strategy is in place. Our future is looking increasingly uncertain, and yet there is still time to get things back on course with bold and ambitious leadership that recognises the scale and the pace of change required, he said. That starts with a fully fledged climate action plan, one that can generally deliver our 2030 target and ensure a green transition that we can all benefit from, in the way of lowering energy bills, long-term sustainable jobs and a healthier planet. Reid Hobhouse, the Liberal Democrat climate spokesperson, said that the government will only reduce half of the emissions needed to meet our 2030 climate targets. It's very alarming. Interim targets matter. The sooner we cut emissions now, rather than in 20 years' time, the better. Rishi Sunak is gambling away our future in what he hopes will help the Conservatives win votes at the next general election. Hype voters will see through their recklessness and hugely irresponsible game. Sunak attended COP28 for barely 12 hours on Friday. He was only there for 12 hours. What a joke. In sharp contrast to other leaders of developed countries who stayed for 2 or 3 days. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, spent 3 days at the UN summit meeting figures including the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the US Presidential Envoy John Kerry, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the former US Vice President Al Gore, and the Barbados Prime Minister Mila Mottley, one of the most prominent voices on climate finances in the developing world. Starmer, speaking to The Guardian, accused Sunak of using the UK's past performances as a shield from having to talk about his emission plans. The Department of Energy Security and Net Zero spokesperson said this report is inaccurate and ignores the fact that we've over-delivered on every target to cut our emissions to date. We will continue to meet our ambitious 2030 target and international commitments under the Paris Agreement, while also giving families more time to make the transition, saving them thousands of pounds at a time when the cost of living is high. Yes, of course, there is a cost of living crisis, and nobody is disputing the cost of living crisis, guys. That is very, very important to highlight. However, Rishi Sunak has shown himself to be someone who is more interested in the money in the pocket rather than the well-being of the British public. And this just adds a caveat once again to how little care and regard he has for the planet. Because when he dies, it's not going to be his problem. That's kind of how he sees it, isn't it, to be honest? We'll say this, though, on Keir Starmer, whatever you might think of him. I'm glad he spent the whole 3 days there speaking to leaders and that. Hopefully those will be in his ear, telling him about how important it is to meet these targets, and hopefully he will try to push hard for these targets when Labour come to power, if they win the next general election, of course. But we will have to wait and see, obviously. But as opposed to the UK meeting its targets, as opposed back from the Paris Agreement, doesn't look very good at all. And I just don't see the Conservatives changing their policies at all. They're going to try and stick with what they're doing, and it's people have just had enough, really, of Conservatives. They really have the vast majority. What do you guys make of it? What do you guys make of these numbers? The UK likely to miss its climate pledge target. Are we going to miss it? Do you think perhaps if Labour get into power next year, depending on when the general election lands, do you think Keir Starmer and a Labour government could help reduce that, increase our chances of potentially meeting the targets? Let me know what you guys honestly think in the comment section down below. Be very interesting to hear what you guys think. Hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share across social media and hit that bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video. And if you want to financially support me, you can do so by buying me a coffee or joining me on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.